So before we go, we're going to talk about DevOps a lot today, but I wanted to go take a step back and talk a little bit about the development team evolution. We can't really talk about DevOps without remembering in 2008 when Netflix was still operating as a monolith, all their web applications. And a single semicolon brought the entire website down. Now this is when DVDs were shipped to your house. They started to do some streaming. But it was kind of an eye-opener back then that we needed to make some changes, and that's when DevOps really started to evolve. And in 2013, Netflix, all of their applications were on the cloud, other than their streaming, geographical streaming hardware. So we had some ideas back then. We wanted to write less code. If you remember, the Clean Code initiative was a big thing. I was part of that wave. But we certainly wanted to write less code. Less code is less prone for error, and it runs faster. So we were doing that, or we thought about doing that. Infrastructure as code, we started to think about that. We started to think about continuous integration. And then the cloud evolution was really starting to kick itself into gear. And a lot of companies were looking at migrating their data centers to cloud. And we were looking at things that we do now, or did then, but we didn't want to do in the future. That would be like long quality assurance cycles. Usually, if we were releasing software, the QA would be the last team to do their work, and things would go beyond deadlines, and it was kind of a finger-pointing exercise to get things into production, if you remember that. And then we started to look at business value instead of just releasing features, and I think that's a real key. So when I talk about DevOps today, it's really about a lot of things. It's not, the word DevOps I think has a lot of meanings, but we're gonna kind of elaborate on really what it is and how it works today, and how it helps companies. So it's not just the technical. A lot of our customers, they want to do, they want to come to us and talk about technical stuff and how to use tools and build infrastructure in the cloud, but they don't have the culture part down. And to do DevOps properly, you really need to have the culture, the agility, an agile practice. Those two things work hand in hand. So I'll talk a little bit about some anti-patterns. These may look familiar. Classic organizational structures with separate teams, especially these days with a lot of distributed work environments. There's a lot of ball tossing back and forth, and that causes slowness and non-collaborative effects. And then the success by features. They measure the fact that we're delivering features, we're releasing on our timeline, so we must be successful. But they're really not having good business outcomes, and there's not a lot of value being delivered with all that effort. And so manually updated and created manually. We'll talk a lot today about infrastructure as code and automation and being able to deploy entire platforms and infrastructure in a matter of minutes instead of manually updating servers and EC2 environments on AWS. It's gotten really fast these days, and we'll talk more about that in detail. And then the manual testing as a bottleneck. We do have unit testing, obviously, and a lot of test automation, but companies still struggle with wanting to test more in manual ways, and that's a big slowdown to deliver on time and fast. So some patterns that we're looking for is continuous security monitoring. I don't know if anybody remembers when Bamboo, it was maybe 8 years ago, I think, that we used to have a lot more. You'd hear more about security vulnerabilities than you do now. I think that's because we're doing continuous security monitoring, and we're actually monitoring our containers as we deploy them and what types of vulnerabilities we have in the code before we deploy, as it's part of the continuous integration strategy. And continuous application monitoring. We always want to monitor and have real-time feedback mechanisms to get value out to customers faster. And then dev teams consider operations as a routine. So our dev teams are not just focusing on code, so to speak. They need to deploy their applications, and they actually have a lot of input and strategy around how they're deploying and what tools they're using to deploy to the cloud. And those are configured down to the code level, down to the application level. And that's an important fact to deploy to containerization, Kubernetes, or serverless. So now that we've kind of looked back, let's look a little bit forward and talk about what it takes to be a digital innovative company today. So digitally advanced enterprises are 8 times more likely to grow share, but still lag behind digital natives. So you've heard cloud native, digital native. Companies that are digital natives can deliver code within minutes and not weeks or months. So there's a huge difference, and a lot of that in this particular article is about the role of containers and deploying applications and containers on Kubernetes clusters. So the one thing that we want to consider is to be digital native is removing operations and infrastructure complexities. And today we're talking about DevOps platforms, and that's really where they come in, and that's where they shine, is they can remove the complexities around the ops part of DevOps. And we'll talk more about that. But teams are able to focus on pull requests and collaboration via pull requests and the code and delivering the value instead of tinkering or doing DIY configurations for deployment to servers and dealing with different environments that are more static. So they're deploying in real time to cloud environments that are pre-configured using infrastructure as code. So the destination is the same as it was 10 years ago, but we're taking the faster route with less traffic. We're not dealing with separate operations teams. We're not focused on handing over artifacts to some sort of an operations team that's going to deploy to an EC2 environment, or even worse, a data center or a bare metal environment. And the speed comes to how you configure your application to be deployed onto the cloud today, and that removes the traffic. It's a direct route, and they can deploy much faster. So teams, again, focusing on business value and not what do they have to do to get their software out there. You can imagine back in the day it was frustrating when you did all the hard work and then you get your application out to production, and then there would be a problem and they'd roll it back and you'd be back to the square one essentially. So the need for speed. To be digitally innovative today, it's not just deploying a web application. You're deploying mobile devices, wearables, AI, chatbots, blockchain, all of the above, or at least a couple. With every, large companies, we have customers that have 100 to 200 dev teams that are working on one or many of these things for either their products or their in-house platforms. So the disruptive business model is around the culture part of it, mapping and matching to the technical part of it. So companies are trying to be agile, which is what this conference is about, I hear, but also tightly coupling that digital native and that ability to be able to deploy to the cloud fast and precise with that agile methodology. So it is about speed. If you can't deploy your applications fast enough, you can't compete. Within a year of Amazon moving to AWS, they deploy code every 11.7 seconds. Anybody in here deploy code every 11.7 seconds? Yeah, me either. But I've seen code deployed within minutes, and we do have customers that do have applications that deploy every 30 minutes, every hour, and that's their preference. And they're able to do that through using DevOps platforms and the right tooling and having the right automation built into their applications. So 4 things. These are not principles. These are just things. I couldn't really come up with a better word other than things. But around teams, so teams are leveraging existing workflows, which usually remain in a git push deploy type environment. And that's where they should be. They should be really thinking about architecture and how they can code the value and deliver the value to the customer. The entire deployment process is now at the disposal of the developer or the developer team. They can request resources and spin up a fully provisioned environments, roll back, deploy, and set deployment automation ruling autonomously, and it's the same every time. It doesn't change. The other cool thing is that teams can choose the tools they want to use. They don't have to be told what tools they're going to use that maybe don't really comply with what the type of development they're doing. So again, it gives them flexibility, and it makes the dev team experience a lot better. In some practices, I kind of use the word continuous many times just to get the point across, but everything is continuous. There's no wait. Continuous development, continuous testing. So this is happening during the CI/CD pipeline process. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, deployment, and so on. Monitoring. Monitoring is at the end, but that's key because that's our real-time feedback mechanism to where if something doesn't look right, we can make the change and redeploy within minutes, not months. And that's a big difference with that 2008 situation. So practices are important. The next thing is the platform, and so we're here to talk about the platform today, and I'll kind of dial in on what that means. I think platform is like DevOps is kind of a word that's been heavily used these days, and there's a lot of meanings to it. But the platform is a hands-free DevOps pipeline on the cloud that allows both developers and operations teams, sometimes they're combined, depending on the company and how large of an operation they're running. But they work collaboratively and cohesively in building and deploying code to any destination. It could be to any cloud, AWS, GKE, Google, Azure, even a hybrid cloud. They can deploy anywhere because the automation is built in again. And the platform allows them to do this in a repetitive way, in a precise way, and they can make changes on the fly, so it's very dynamic. Each team in an organization can collaboratively plan, build, secure, and deploy software to drive business outcomes faster. If you're going to be competitive as a business today, you need to get your changes out there. I used to work for a company that was legally mandated, so whenever there was legislation, they would change laws. We had to get changes out to production as fast as we could. And if we didn't, there would be fines, and the fines were daily fines. So there was a lot of pressure for us to deliver and deploy code and deploy fixes fast, and we couldn't do that. So it was quite a stressful environment. And there was a lot of burnout with developer teams, and again, there was a lot of finger pointing and things like that. I'm sure you've experienced kind of the end game of deploying big applications to whatever environment. So this platform is going to help make it easier and allow traceability and visibility to the rest of the organization about what's happening with the landscape of applications that are being deployed to the cloud environments. And then most importantly, the continuous feedback. If we didn't have feedback, we wouldn't know what necessarily to do next. So there's that feedback mechanisms that are put in place. Part of the CI/CD build is the feedback mechanisms, and then the analytics that are driven, status page by Atlassian, OpsGenie, and so forth. Automation friendly, security aligned, and observability. We want to have great visibility. That's one of the biggest asks from large companies that are customers of ours is how can we see what's happening? We're not a dev team. We're not really in the weeds of getting our code out to some cloud platform, but we need to see what's happening. So DevOps, again, is culture, practices, and tooling. It's all of those things. It's not just the techie stuff. And if you don't have all those things, it's not really going to work. We have another company called Aligned Agility with Adaptavist group, and they do the Agile, and we do the DevOps, and those things, they need to go together. So the tooling supports the ability to deliver applications at high velocity. Again, talking about speed. So the DevOps evolution, to wrap up, is CI/CD, microservices and serverless. You're probably going to end up in one of those camps if you're a digital native. Infrastructure as code, that's what's really speeding up that deployment and making it consistent. And the observability and monitoring to get that feedback and have that visibility across the landscape of applications that are being deployed. This is the evolution. So we can't talk about DevOps without talking about cloud. And again, with cloud, generally speaking, no matter if you're using Terraform, Lambda, or whatever, you're going to have some containerization. And you're going to have the plus of containerizing your applications is to have well-defined isolated runtimes and portability and supportability and fast provisioning. Again, we can spin up an entire platform with a dev stack for a team within minutes. And I'm talking about full stack, everything that you need with the DevOps platform and all of the development environments, the servers, the network, the security, the everything. And then you need the orchestration, Kubernetes, unless you're using serverless or going serverless, to manage deploying and scaling the containers. And the other beautiful thing is if you have 2 users on your application one day and you have 200,000 the next day, this will scale. So yes, we all want to be cloud natives. Most companies that most of our customers are not, but we certainly want to be cloud natives because if you are, you're definitely able to deploy your applications faster. So the struggle, let's talk real quick about the struggle. These are some examples of customers that we have. Major airline, so they literally do have 200 dev teams. And they have the right mix of technology. We've helped them. We've gotten them onto AWS. They're using cloud. They're using containers. They're using Docker. And but every team is at a different maturity level, so they can't really get on their platform, or not all their teams can because they're not already. So that's one thing that we've considered with a cultivated DevOps platform is some sort of on-ramping process for apps. And so we've built app templates and some automation around that and some checks and balances to allow teams to get their apps ready for cloud and ready to be deployed in these more modern environments. Large financial companies stuck in the legacy systems, their tools are fragmented, there's a lot of DIY. I see that everywhere. Everybody's doing DIY, and they're tools are everywhere, and many of them do the same thing. So they have a hard time with consistency and having all their teams deploy in the same way. Not that there needs to be standards. They should be able to choose their own tools, but they should be doing it in a way that facilitates their automation and their infrastructure as code. If that is the same and if that is best practices and done consistently, then it won't matter, and they'll be able to do the same and deploy just as fast. So we work with these customers on these things. Big communications company, low consistency and insight hampers reuse and attempts to best practices. We see that also. They try hard to do right. They want to get on and do the right things, but they just keep backtracking back to old bad habits, and they don't really facilitate those best practices across the rest of the company. So there's some teams that are deploying more consistently and faster than other teams. So we have incompatibles. We have mismatches of tooling and processes that cause issues at all levels. We have walls and silos if we don't have the culture right. And what ends up happening in the end is friction and frustration and burnout of the development teams, or the teams. It could be development, DevOps, and combinations of teams. And that's where the DevOps platforms and what we're trying to do at Venue is change that, because we feel that in order to deliver value fast, it's really about the dev teams, and it's about their experience. And I've personally experienced bad experiences for years, but we're at a different time today, and that really shouldn't be happening with considering all the technology that we have and the abilities we have to deploy to the cloud. So that takes me to talk about the dev experience, or the dev team experience. You've probably seen the letters DX in places. But the whole point of the DevOps or the DX developer team experience is a couple of principles, and we'll walk through them real quick, but it's the function. It should function. It should be the tooling solution, should fit the needs of the organization, the processes. Again, there's no special set of tools that is the only way to go. There's a lot of tools to choose from, and they may work better for certain teams depending on what kind of applications or what type of development they're doing. The clarity is key, because if these teams are off doing their thing and they're doing great work, but there's no clarity, there's no transparency to the rest of the organization, there's no real way to shine, and they don't see the value. So the clarity is important. The visibility is important. And the stability, it has to be a repeatable tooling that is, very stable and is scalable based on the size of the organization. Most of the examples that I've talked about today are medium to enterprise companies. These are not small companies. They're struggling most with getting their applications deployed fast and using best practices in cloud technologies. And they're also looking for stability and consistency. And then the ease of use. We'll talk more about that, but the ease of use is important. It's so complicated with all the YAML files and all of the configurations, and understanding the complexities of cloud and containers and all that. It's almost like going to order a pizza, but they ask you what kind of flour do you want to use when we make your pizza. I don't know what kind of flour should I use on my pizza. There's just a lot out there, and so the developer experience or the developer team shouldn't really be having to think that way. They should really be placed in the right spot to do their work, and everything should just be there for them. So ease of use is key. And then security is obviously pinnacle. You can't really do anything today without being secure. So that happens also in the process of building and deploying. It's built in. So we need a platform that is able to deploy reliably and breeds trust and quality. And that is the culture part. So if we can have this system, this platform, and the dev experience is awesome, and it breeds out this information to the rest of the organization, then we're good. We're good to go. And we're reducing the toolchain complexity because, again, we're building it into our app. It's part of our app. It's our infrastructure as code. We've already chosen the tools. They're part of the way we build, and they're part of the way we deploy, so we don't need to revisit that again. If we decide to change tools later, it's just a matter of changing some files. And every solution will eventually suck because we're a fast-moving digital world, and no architecture will last forever, even though some core design patterns are still around, MVC and whatever. Cloud architecture is going to change. A lot of companies are trying to move to serverless now. Serverless was like, whoa, what's that? It's more and more popular these days with microservice architecture and stuff like that. And extendability allows stacks to move with the innovation. And so we can always extend, we can always change, and it's built into our automation. So we're able to innovate as fast as we want. And a unifying platform and tools with a single consistent platform. And that's where we're really talking about today, is a DevOps platform. Things that, you've heard IDP, internal developer platform, like Compass, Atlassian Compass is in beta right now. It provides a dashboard and all the integrations and all the information, but it has the connections to that automation and cloud deployment stuff. So what do I mean by cultivated? We've cultivated a platform, but it's really based on what dev teams need, and they need a lot of things. There are a lot of tools out there. You can see just these are a few. I couldn't fit all the tools onto. I'd have to have 6 slides probably to show all the tools. But there's cloud tools. There's AWS. There's EC2. There's Anchor. There's a lot of stuff. And every team if you have 200 dev teams at a big airline, they're probably using one or many of all of these different tools. So it can get very complicated when you start to look at scale. And not just tools. There's also frameworks. Tools and frameworks. Dev frameworks. There's Gradle, there's Rails, Ruby on Rails, Spring Boot. And all teams are using different frameworks, and they have different scaffolding mechanisms and things like that to consider when they're building their applications, when they're starting a new application, and when they're architecting an application. All of these things need to be considered. So the platform needs to be able to deal with all of that and make it less complex. It takes the complexity out of the operations part of dev, but it also takes some of the complexity out of the dev part. And again, when we use the DevOps platform and we use this consistent method of work, then all of these things are just kind of baked in. So let's talk about a DevOps platform. Venue is a new product that we're releasing, as I am now the co-founder of Venue DevOps, part of Adaptavist group. We're setting the stage. We use a lot of rock star band, symphony, orchestra kind of words around it for marketing purposes. But Venue DevOps is a platform that removes the complexities of building a DevOps pipeline with a quick, easy, and secure way to automate the software build, integration, and deployment processes. So again, we'll see in a minute that they can still be complex. Even if you have the tools and you have the infrastructure as code, it can get quite complex with all the YAML files and things like that. And how do you want to deploy to the cloud, and what does the structure of your Kubernetes cluster look like? How's your networking work? There's a lot of, you could definitely get into another DIY situation and configuration situation real quick. So basically, again, this platform is designed to deliver the confidence that we talked about and the peace of mind. The teams can focus on what's important, which is pull requests and delivering value to their customers. There's full transparency and traceability. Traceability is key, so we actually have the ability to generate Jira projects and tie in that traceability to what's happening on the dev stack. And we can do that automagically, whether it's cloud or DC. And speed up the time to ship to code. Basically, the platform is there to help you do all the things that I've talked about for the last 30 minutes. And the tool chain, you choose. You choose the tool chain, and you can grab whatever tools you want. And we've built in the ability to enter your information through a form and not have to do config files, and it will actually generate the automation and generate the service template or the app template that you're trying to do and deploy and develop automatically, and it'll deploy it out to the cloud of your choice. So a little bit of how it works. You can access the front end by a browser, or we're going to build in a shell. A lot of development teams like to work in terminals, as I do, and they'll be able to execute and create applications that are ready to be deployed to the cloud with commands in the shell. In this example, we're using Compass as the IDP. We're using Bitbucket as our Git repository, and Bamboo for our CI/CD pipelines. And they're using monitoring tools, Kubernetes on AWS. That's just one example. Venue will allow you to use, you can basically plug and play those different aspects. It can be the cloud of your choice, and again, you'll be filling out forms that are UI forms, or you can do it through commands, and it'll generate the YAML file for you, and then you still have the ability to go in and edit YAML. So I kind of did the YAML. I know you can't read that, but that's just part of a YAML file for infrastructure. So again, we will have the configuration. You'll answer some questions, and it'll generate the infrastructure automation configuration, and then you can edit it as you need to. The same thing with pipelines. Same thing with processing and integrations, and same thing with your applications. All this configuration is available via the UI. And then the terminal is coming soon. We hope to launch this beta version this summer, so look for it, and thank you very much.